Well, what do they do to move ahead, get that sense of vigor, and regain their creativity? The first thing is awareness. It's smell the coffee. How are things going in my life?
Mm-hmm.
How am I feeling? Great, not so great, and how are the people around me feeling? And that's in the family, at work, in the neighborhood. Does the neighborhood ever get together and have picnics, or do we, kind of try to hit each other in the crosswalk? These awareness, if you're not aware, forget about it.
Yeah.
So the second thing is to think about it, is to reflect.
That's what got me a little bit. The reflection, one might think should come later on, right? But you get into the reflection, become aware,
Yep.
and then reflect back on
how did
your
it get
awareness.
this way? Exactly. How did it get this way? How did I get so busy? What's my motivation? Is it part of my values? Because we'll talk, I figure, about values, because values are the basic part of one's energy and the source of one's meaning in life.
That is going to be my next question. You jumped the gun on me.
Sorry. So, am I living my values?
Right.
So that's the reflection part.
And
Next,
that must lead into the next one, which is conversation. Have that conversation.
Have the conversation with yourself, with other people who you respect, who may be dear in your life.
Mm-hmm.
It can be, sometimes it's a stranger on the plane. You get some insights. The reason the conversation is in those steps is because we don't have very many good conversations these days.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about Twittering, and I'm not talking about email, and I'm not talking about texting. I'm talking about sitting down with someone you think highly of and who thinks highly of you, or again, it could be a perfect stranger sometimes, and talking about some very important things, such as what are some alternatives. Saturday was talking with a very busy, very skilled person who said, I really want to do some writing. And so she was asking me about writing. And
Did you encourage her?
Oh, absolutely. Of course I encouraged her. I put my heart into hers. And I said, though, start simple. John Gardner was an extraordinarily important part of my life and many people's lives, and he was on the faculty here. He started Common Cause. He was secretary of HEW. And one of the things and he was important in getting Renew started when all these had the setbacks. One of the things that he said, which is not intuitive to people who are driven, which most of everybody we know is driven,
mm-hmm.
He said, don't do the hard things first. And so as we were talking about writing, he said, collect threads. And this is what I told the woman on Saturday. He said, just write down an idea that you have, or if you see an article, or if you read a book, put it in a file. And after a while, the file gets more than one piece of paper, or more than one, if it's on your computer. Make sure you back up your computer. You'd feel bad if you lost all that stuff. You'd feel bad.
Sounds like you have.
Oh, you're looking at it. Any rate, so the conversations can come when somebody says, you're kind of doing it the hard way. Or they may say, I've done it differently. You see, part of that conversation is that we don't have to have every idea in the world. Somebody else has had a good idea or has experience that plays in. And again, not to get too linguistic about this, but conversation is also a wonderful word, because con means with, as in consensus, and versus means turn. So when you're in a conversation, it means you're willing to turn with someone to perhaps 5-degree difference, or maybe you make a 180 flip.
Mm-hmm.
But it has a sense of respect and eagerness and willingness, and the question that you were having about, is this the sequence, awareness, reflection, conversation, then plan and act. Well, after you have a conversation, you might go back and reflect some more.
There you go.
Or you might get a new awareness and kind of start it again. This is not, I'm sorry to say, it's not an overnight pink pill, quick fix.
But you put up a nice little roadmap, and when you talked about the conversation just a little bit ago, you mentioned, and possibly a conversation with yourself.
Uh-huh.
And I find that useful sometimes, in if I'm not with someone, but I can have that conversation. I can reflect and look, and sometimes I'm even talking out loud to myself, and I don't think I'm crazy for doing that. Am I?
No,
Doc?
Definitely not.
No, is it that if I answer myself I am, or is that okay
No,
too?
if the orange juice answers you.
Okay. We're talking to Dr. Linda Clever here, the author of the Fatigue Prescription. She's going to be on campus this Thursday, October 14th at 6 p.m. at the Stanford bookstore. You can catch her. Are you going to be reading some from the book?
If people want, it's really interesting. We actually usually start off doing the renuometer and
really?
Talking about some answers, not deep and soul searching, but just kind of what struck people. And then we'll talk about values, and we'll talk about what people want.
This might be a great tool for students because, especially here at Stanford, and I'm sure students in higher learning arenas are being driven beyond belief now. So
much of what we do is our choice, and that's what people don't often understand. So yes, we're driven, but just your previous interview, the person you interviewed, as she and I were talking as she left, she said, I'm going out and take a walk. She said, I have to take care of myself or I can't stay up.
Wow.
So we have what we can control. I mean, there are kind of three things on a good day: behavior, attitude, and aspirations.
There you go.
And so if you have a calendar, which most of us do, you can put me on the calendar, and you can put go for a walk. If you don't put it on the calendar, it won't happen.
Right.
So yes, it's extremely important for students. There are all kinds of data to back this up. I mean, this isn't just listening to people. We know that people are more creative and innovative when they come back from the vacation. We know that people are more open-minded and kind of have a lot more zing on Monday than Friday. I mean, TGIF isn't just, that's not for nothing that people say that.
Yeah.
So that the wisdom that we have of taking a break, I'm not talking necessarily, 10-year break. I'm just talking maybe just taking a big breath can be a break.
Yeah.
To use our wisdom not just for facts and not just for discovering the next new thing in the world, but for discovering about ourselves and taking care of ourselves. This is the bumper sticker, which, as someone pointed out, must be the world's longest bumper sticker. So it starts on the driver's side and it goes all the way around the back and it goes all the way. But at any rate, it is this. It is not selfish to take care of yourself. It's self-preservation so you can do what you want to do and what you need to do. That's the deal.
You think Americans have gotten away from that?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, not everybody. We take better care of our cars than we take care of us. I mean, we put gas in our cars. We don't put energy into us very much.
Yeah, we've heard recently, too, that, and this has been going on for years, but now it's finally kind of filtering this way. Spain, all throughout Europe, especially in Spain and Italy, lunchtime comes, everything shuts down for 2 hours.
Yeah, everything has its ups and downs. It's kind of like weather, And Florida has hurricanes, we have earthquakes, Nebraska has tornadoes, whatever. The idea of shutting down for 4 or 5 hours every day probably does cut the productivity and the output.
Don't they have a 2-hour lunch? Isn't that the thing? It is. From noon to 2.
It's good.
Don't expect to get anything done because everybody's gone home to have lunch or whatever they need to do. And
it's a good thing.
If you think about it, if you're going to go have lunch, wouldn't it be nice to have a little time after that to take a nap or relax or take it easy? This is some of the information in your book.
It's true, especially if you don't drink at that lunch.
Yeah.
I mean, you're having a little vino there. It kind of cuts into your...
well, that's a whole other ball game.
Well, there you go.
Moving along now, what about values? Because that plays up in this, and you've mentioned it. As a matter of fact, it's not a chapter, but it's a good piece in the book.
Well, and it comes again and again. That's the kind of pedagogical approach. You repeat it, and then you drop it, and then you bring it back, and you bring it back. So it's in the book in several different places. So what most people who give themselves some thought come to realize is that their values, living their values, is the source of the meaning in their lives. And that, in the West, that is the Occident, that's what we're looking for, most of us, is to have meaning, to make a difference, to have that sense of accomplishment, whether it's with wonderful music or wonderful science or art or whatever, being a wonderful parent, these sorts of things, this sense of making a difference in the world.
Mm-hmm.
The roots of that meaning are our values, and our values are how we decide what's good and bad, how we decide what's right and wrong, how at the end of the day or week or at the end of our lives, looking back, we said, I lived the way that was important to me. And knowing those values and writing them down, and then having a conversation with dear ones, and it can be neighbors, it can be colleagues, it can be family members, it needs probably to be all those people, finding out what their values are, then we can come to some agreements. If there are differences, that's okay, but then talk it out. And then sometimes, and what I've seen is so interesting, is, for example, when a family has, and I can just tell a story. This was happened to be a physician family, and they got together and they were saying, how's it going? And the kid said, Dad, we'd really like to see more of you. And he said, well, but I, need to earn the living and have this calling. And they said, well, Dad, we'd like to see more of you. So it turns out that they played baseball, and he knew baseball, and he became their baseball coach, not just there, but other in the Little League.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, how did you do it? How did you really do it? And he said, saw fewer patients.
There you go. And I guess that comes down to values. You got
That's
to change your values. What's valuable?
He still took wonderful care of patients, and he was then returning to taking wonderful care of his family.
Mm-hmm.
And, he said that's just have to cut something.
Comes down to choices, doesn't it?
And we have those choices if we think about them and if we talk about them. That's it. We often get in just the whir and the blur and the rut.
What kind of advice would you give someone? Because you've been there, your life kind of temporarily fell apart, and this book came out of your journey back to health and sanity, for lack of a better word. What kind of advice would you give to someone who has, say, 3 jobs and more than a couple of kids, and might even be a single person, mother or father, and is completely strapped, and they don't even have time to even think about stuff like this? What could they do?
I think a couple of things. One, your comment about sanity. I gave a seminar on Saturday, and the title was "Keeping Your Sanity Despite Dueling Demands." So, because people do feel crazy sometimes, they just feel like they're going crazy.
Yeah.
Well, the thing that I would do first is listen to this person and find out what's really, really, really important to them. Now, right now, we are in pretty severe financial situations, and a lot of people are.
Yeah.
And I think you can't just blow that off. You have to say, this is serious, and you are exhausted, and you do have to put peanut butter on your bread and your kids' bread, and you do have to pay. That's true. You can't deny that. The things that after listening to a person and hearing some of their hopes and dreams and what they would like to be doing, if not right this minute, maybe in 6 months from now or maybe 2 years, the things that I would be thinking about and sharing and having this conversation about is, if there's something that you want to learn, because learning is one of the things that keeps us full of vitality and excitement, is there any way to wedge 5 or 10 minutes into a day or into a week of, find a website? If you can't take a course at the community college, can you read half a chapter in a book over a 3 or 4 day period?
Yeah.
It's back to John Gardner's comment of don't do the hard things first. Start small. Take little steps. Sometimes people, and I've also heard people who say, we don't need to get a new car every 3 years. I'd rather spend more time with my parents. My parents are getting old.